As I get to go before the main, I will try not to keep you too long, because I'm sure you're all hungry. I'm going to take a slightly different tack from Megan. She was very operational. I'm going to step back and go to the things that give me nightmares. So, countering cyber risk. I find the biggest challenge when countering risk with accountants is that I have a very, very different perception of risk to an accountant. I'm looking at it from an IT perspective. I see all sorts of horrible, scary nightmares. They see things that are stopping them getting fees and bills out. And trying to meet them in the middle can be quite fun. I'm going to demonstrate some of the things there by wandering off completely off topic, but I promise we'll bring it back at the end. So on the weekend, I undertake an activity that many of you are probably going to look at it and go, why the hell did you do that? That's crazily risky. Why would you do it? So for fun, I ride a GSXR 750 Suzuki. Does anyone here ride motorbikes? Okay, so at least two of you might agree that I'm not completely insane, right? Most of my friends and family look at that and think, that's way too risky. Why the hell would you do it? Especially as firsthand, I've seen the risk of what can happen when it goes wrong. I've done the time sitting in intensive care with someone that came off. I saw someone in the bed next to us not make it to the next morning, but I still get on the bike and ride it. Why would I do that? Quite simply because I've put a whole lot of processes in place that manage the risk for me. And strangely, while I was out on the bike on Sunday, I was thinking how some of those actually map over to IT. I don't know why I was thinking that. Normally I concentrate on the roads, but for some reason the fact that I had to give this talk today was sort of playing on my mind a bit. So let's just take you on this little journey and try and join up how the hell riding a bike can match with managing your cyber risks. Let's start with the first one. Know your environment. I might be seen as a little bit of a coward by some riders because I only go out in nice sunny weather when it's dry. Mostly because I own a bike that can go from 0 to scary in about 2 seconds all in first gear. Do that in the rain and you go from 0 to why am I looking at sky and does everything feel cold? I'm not interested in that. So that's control number 1, pick your environment. Control 2, invest in the best kit you can afford within your budget. You might not be able to afford the stuff that a MotoGP racer owns because they have a lovely support team that comes along and fixes their leathers every single time they fall off. And they fall off a lot more than me. But go find a set that you can afford. Personally, I found a little company up in Lincolnshire that made race leathers for most of the British Superbike paddock. And they used the same materials and the same technologies for making kit for the road racer. I bought it 20 years ago. I just about fit into it, so that's another risk I have to manage. Can't enjoy too many of these meals, or my rather expensive set of leathers is going to be rather useless, and I really don't want to go down that road. On the kit side as well, I own a helmet that's race spec. I don't race, but it's got that certification for it. Why not do the same with the rest of your kit? It doesn't have to be spec for what you do. You can overspec it if you can afford it. And the last thing is I have a weird set of controls and beliefs about how I ride the bike. I generally stick to the speed limit. Please note the use of generally. I do have a few set of rules when I'm allowed to bend that. So if it's a road I know really well, there's nobody else on it, and it's lovely and clear and dry, I might put... No one's from the police here, are they? Right? Probably should have asked that first. But I will exceed it. I mean, the bike lets me do it. But it's only for a certain amount of time. It's only on the roads I know really well, and I generally try and stick below 3 figures because at that point everything gets a bit blurry and you really don't want anything to go wrong at those speeds. I do have an exception to that rule, which does come back again to the cyber thing. There's a term in biking, time exposed to danger. You want to overtake something, that means you're in the other lane with cars coming the other way. At that point, I switch off my speeding filter and just go as fast as I can to get back into the lane, because by doing that, I'm reducing my risk. That sounds a little bit crazy, but honestly it works. I'd even tested it just to make sure the theory worked on Saturday by overtaking a few slow-moving things. Sounds crazy, but it's true. If you're in the other lane and there's something coming the other way, you're looking at a 120-mile-an-hour collision, and believe me, that's not a fun place to be. So how the hell do you map those? Oh, and my daughter insisted I had to tell you this one, because I was talking to her and she said, you haven't thought about this one, and she insisted I give her credit. So my 13-year-old says I have to tell you, experience. I've been riding that bike since I bought it in 2007. I have a series of roads that I tend to stick to. I know the road, I know the bike, I know how they're going to behave. Again, strangely, you can map experience onto IT processes. So we've done the sort of scary and the off-topic bit. How do you bring those back into an IT environment and systems like SensorNet? Well, environment. Know the data you've got. What are you protecting? Do you have sitting somewhere in your systems a high-value client or a high-profile client? The sort of person that if their tax affairs end up on the news, your marketing team's going to be sitting in a corner crying somewhere. Well, advance the protection you put on those clients. Lock them down a bit more. Take a little bit more care over those ones because the fees they're generating for you justify the extra expenditure. That's actually quite an easy one when I try and talk to the bosses about that one. If you can sort of point out that you've got this sports personality over here, and if that turns up in the press, you might be looking at a couple of £1 million. It's amazing how quickly you get some funding to lock things down. I hate we have to break things to get funding, but it seems to happen quite a lot. The next one, well, equipment. Again, the bike's stupidly scary, but I've invested in it. The first time I had the tyres replaced, the guy in the bike shop said, hey, we've got these ones over here. They're an upgrade from the ones you got. They're extra sticky. Hell yes, because when you're riding a bike, you're basically attached to the road by two little contact patches the size of a credit card. Those of you that drive cars, you're sitting there with a seat belt, and you're sitting there with airbags and a big metal box that's been designed to crumple and crash. Those of us on bikes, the only thing holding you onto the bike is your hands. You come off, none of that fun stuff's there. So you invest in the kit to make sure you stay on it. Now, we then get into the time exposed to danger. How does that relate to anything IT? Well, actually, I've managed to figure how we can tie that back to SensorNet. And Megan touched on some of these earlier as well. You've got capabilities in there that means you can look at when your business unit comes along and says, hey, look, I really need to be able to access this site. It turns out most of the time they don't. We used to allow everyone to access Dropbox if they were part of a group. The problem was there, up and download. They could do both ways. It was quite a big hole. We got SensorNet and I accidentally forgot to put that group to give them access because we decided, similar to Megan's process, everyone can download from any web storage. We don't care where you've got your download. We've got all sorts of other scanners that are going to filter that out and check it, but you're not uploading to it. And we were expecting quite a bit of kickback from that, and strangely, we didn't get it. What we then got was a couple of people that said, well, I need to be able to upload a file to this provider once a month. So, okay, that's a once a month process. I'm not leaving you open for the entire time to let you do a 5-minute upload. Contact my team. We've got a lovely process set up. You tell them, they know when you're going to do it, so they'll then go on. And at first they were being slightly less diligent than I would like because the lovely rules that Giles had helped us set up, they just saw the one that said block upload and turned it off. That increased our time exposed to danger because at that point what the team was just done was enable anybody to upload to any web-based storage. We only needed to upload to one site. So at that point it was a little bit of an education journey of taking them down into CASB because they'd just seen the first big button. They hadn't gone down to the second level. And in there, it's a treasure trove. I mean, it's lovely. You can be so granular. You can have a field day. As Megan says, it will generate more data than like an entire team can look at in a year. But when you've got one person accessing one system, it's so simple. You just go in, type Dropbox, and it shows you all the actions you control. They're lovely color-coded, so they can scroll down, see the one that says upload that's red, drag it one stage to the left, the person uploads the file, close the exemption again. Your time exposed to danger is minimalized because you're giving the minimum window of vulnerability to the exactly one system, and that, okay, it's everybody in the company, but the chances of someone being compromised and trying to upload to web-based storage in the 5 minutes we leave Dropbox open, it's almost negligible. So it's using the capabilities you've got to fine-tune your security. You will find people might kick back when you deploy a new system, and it's like, well, we've always done things this way. Why do we now have to do it this way? Especially in accountancy. It's time and fees driven. I assume most of you are sort of in that sort of environment. Time is almost literally money as far as you're concerned. And you don't like it when the IT team says, please take 5 minutes longer to do this thing you used to be able to do almost instantly. But persist. Explain to them why it's risky to let everybody upload to every piece of web-based storage, and just convince them that your process works. It's taken 2 years before this person's managers even noticed the process is in place. And then as soon as we just said, look, it's processed, we've got all this, they do it, we haven't had a response from them, which I love, because otherwise I have to spend a lot of time explaining policies and procedures, and accountants switch off about 3 seconds into most of those discussions. But that's fine, we're used to it. You get that, the last point. So we've done kit, we've done time exposed to danger, experience. Skilled IT staff, skilled security staff are rare. And most people, if you're running small teams, you're not going to be able to afford to get every single skill set you want. I'm trying to decide whether misfortune or pleasure is the right word. I am the IT security team for Menzies. And I sort of fell into the role because I sort of liked all the security filters. So I used to run them back when I worked on the service desk. And then someone said, why don't you sit the CISM exam? And stupidly I said yes. Oddly, that was 6 of the most interesting months I spent studying for it, but I'm not going to admit to that ever. It doesn't leave this room. And you start to think there are ways you can improve things. There are ways you can tighten processes up. You can tighten procedures up without impacting how people do their day-to-day job. And ultimately, your job is protecting the data that is valuable to your company, protecting the client's information they have given you and trusting you to keep safe and not have appear on the front page of The Sun or anywhere interesting like that. I'm hoping there's wood under there. So far we haven't had any of those problems. But you still get the low-level stuff, which you have to work with. The phishing fails because, and I will admit this is the one that I hear the most, and I'm pretty sure it will be from every accountancy firm. I failed because I was in a hurry. I was in a rush. I didn't really read the email properly. I just clicked on it, and then the big red message came up. And I find the most curious thing is they then challenge the message that tells them they failed the phishing test and don't even think about the fact that the one that got them in that place in the first place. That's a really fun conversation. So curiously, as I said, all of those weird risk management methods that you can put outside of work, you can bring into your IT environment. They think about things a little bit differently. My boss has to hold me back. I am a fiend for new systems. If you guys try and sell me stuff, I will generally buy. I love shiny new technologies. My boss, on the other hand, is very good at pulling me back and waving budget figures in front of me, and he loves to negotiate with vendors. At that point, I step away because most vendors then start swearing at me, because he's the sort of person that walks into the car dealership and starts the negotiation point at give me the car for free. But that brings me back to that point on just see what you can buy for your budget. There's loads of vendors out there that will tell you they're the best in the market. They will put price tags on that reflect that. I have spoken to some and done proof of concepts with some recently that do that. And you look at the results you get back, and it's really not worth the money. Whereas we did the proof of concept with Sensinet, and I was trying to chew their arm off to sign it. It solved so many of our problems and at a price point that we could afford. And that is now the sort of measure I hold everybody else to when I'm doing proof of concept as well. I try and get them to give them, again, apologies to the sales types in the room, but the thing where they always say you give them your budget, and they'll then come back and go, yeah, it's fine, we can fit within that. And then you get the quote at the end of it, and there's like 3 times as much. That was a fun conversation. The other thing, so cyber risk. Your accountancy, the management committee for our company definitely sees things differently to me. So most of the job is persuading them. You can go and do all your risk analysis. You can go and give your likelihoods and your impact scores and do all the lovely numbers, and you can give it because accountants like numbers, but it's how they perceive it is going to be the issue. They might not see something you see as a really, really serious threat as a threat at all, and then it's on you to just try and have that conversation and bring them along on the journey that you're on and just point out, look, yes, now you don't see this as a threat, but this is happening out in the market, this is happening out to other companies, people are falling for this vulnerability is live now, and we need to invest in it. Would you rather take, it's going to cost you £1 million to fix this if it happens, would you like to give me 10% of that now to go and fix it, or do you want to wait till it happens and then still give me the 10% to go and fix it and still pay all the consequences? And that conversation works a lot. Again, I guess because some of our accountants, it's a LLP, so every penny I spend is one they don't take home. So any penny I stop them not taking home is great as far as they're concerned. But pick your battles, pick how you define it, and just try and keep your risk defined in terms they can understand. It can be tricky. You have to learn your people, learn what they think is a threat, learn what they know. I always used to say that they would come back from a day out golfing with some of the others in the group, and one of them had seen something on the news, and I could almost predict what we were going to get asked that afternoon. It's, do we have defences in place for X, Y, and Z? It's like, yeah, you guys were talking about that on the course this morning, weren't you? So it's a constantly evolving situation, and it is very, very perceptive, and that is the biggest challenge you're going to have to deal with. That you in an IT team, you might see something as an existential threat, and the guys and ladies sitting owning the company might just see it as a slight annoyance if it happens. And you've got to reconcile that somehow. I'm still working on that one. If anyone has a magic bullet, please tell me. I will happily accept all answers. At that point, anyone got any questions around anything?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, I found it quite interesting in terms of noticing and taking extra care around those clients that you say would be really bad publicity and things like that. But how difficult is that to manage? You're talking about different teams and processes, right? And where do you draw the line as well?
It's actually very difficult to manage. Historically, lots of companies run very open systems. And when you then start to talk about deploying layers of security, or role-based security is the one that is the battle I'm currently fighting, you get the kickback of, but I've always been able to access that. So why do you need to be able to access that? Why do you need to see the tax return for this client when you don't work on it? Why do our audit team need to see the tax return for that client when they don't work on it? I think I'm slowly winning that battle, but there's a lot of change involved underneath. So start with the easy wins. We have a new DMS system that is pushed out, and that has security. And we're starting to tie that up so that the client teams that are set up in one system get replicated over, so that the minimum number of people that can see that high-value client or high-value company see that. I have to say the biggest challenge there is business support teams, because they work for every team, which means they end up collecting a lot of access. And as much as I love our business support teams, they're also the ones that click on almost anything that comes to them. So that's sort of your challenge. It's persuading the business that it's a good idea to maybe limit their access, that you don't need to see stuff. If you need it, we'll give you access, fine. But if you don't need it day-to-day, don't have it. We're slowly starting to win. We've managed to lock away 2 teams so far. So our payroll, for some reason, that was seen as obvious, but tax, audit, and corporate tax were not seen as quite so obvious. But we've started, they've made the first step, so now I just need to keep nudging them along that path.
Cool.
Got a question.
Go.
So you mentioned, so you kind of manage their appetite risk by saying if this happens, X might happen.
Oh, yes.
How do you manage your own? How do you decide what battle you're going to face? Because realistically, it's not going to be your fault, but is that down to experience or?
Some of it is experience, some of it is also talking to external vendors. There's a couple of parties you keep in touch with who are doing a lot of more threat analytics than I can possibly ever have time to do. And if you're really lucky, you'll have good security partners that are going to tell you, hey, look, have you seen this vulnerability out there? I know you guys run this system, it's got this issue, and we're seeing it actively exploited. If you're really lucky, it happens right around the time you're having your annual pen test done, and the tester goes, fix this like last week. But you get that done once a year. So a lot of it is just keeping your ear to the ground, listening to as many sources as you can, and just trying to aggregate all the information that the security companies are throwing at you all the time, and just look for those big flashing red flags that say, this thing over here that you thought last week was perfectly safe, yeah, somebody broke into it last week for this company over here, and you're running the same version, which means you've got the same issue. Get that fixed ASAP.
How do you get through, like, I mean, I'm working in marketing, so I'm biased, but there's a lot of marketing noise and fluff around cybersecurity. I subscribe to all the Google alerts of everything that happens, so I want to know what happens. But there's so much to go through. Is it kind of the word of mouth from sources that you trust, or is it just piling through webpage after webpage? Pick and choose your sources. Personally, yeah, same as you, I get blasted with loads, but after 2 or 3, you've sort of gauged the quality of the information. And if it's not that good, it gets the Mimecast button gets hit for block. If it's good, it gets added to allow, and I'll keep an eye on it. But I think I've got 3 or 4 sources that I really trust, and they've put a lot of money into it. And even though we're not clients of theirs, they still send us the alerts, and I quite value that. It also builds a relationship with the future, because if you start looking for a new system and you think, well, this guy's been telling me about this problem for 2 years, maybe I should look at his system. But it is just having those trusted sources of information, because there's so much noise out there. You can't listen to all of it all the time, or you'll just have a nervous breakdown and be hiding under the table gibbering all the time. So hopefully that answers your question. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Everyone else is just thinking, food!
Well, we've got 10 minutes of closing remarks to get through first.
Oh, no pressure. Go on then, Giles.
So when you were running that kind of hidden environment, which
Yeah.
app or application shocked you the most and was the easiest to convince the budget holders to sign off?
Ooh. Still having some of those debates now. There's a couple of things that we would really like to get our hands on. There's a few things that are sort of low hanging fruit. The one that I really want to get right is our Siemens SOC solution. We've had it tested recently and it did not exactly cover itself in glory. So that's the one that gives me the nightmares. I have solutions I trust. Mimecast, as we were talking about earlier, it works. It's got its issues because it's grown way past its original source, but it's still working. It's blocking, I think when I checked last week, we're getting 480,000 emails from Russia every day that it's auto-blocking because I think we may have annoyed them somehow. But it's doing its job, so I don't worry about that one. Sentinet's doing its job. I don't worry about you guys stopping people getting on websites I don't want because I've seen it do it lots of times. It's the things in the background, the advanced stuff that isn't necessarily talking to itself, talking to each other properly. Those are the things that I really want to get the investment so that there aren't holes in what the SIEM and the SOC are seeing. So that it's that I don't have time to sit and look at all of these alerts. I don't have time to sit and monitor all these systems. I trust somebody else to do that. And if I can't trust them to do it, then I'm back to hiding under the table and gibbering. And I don't like hiding under the table. Hopefully that answers your question, Giles.
Another question, actually it's for both Megan and Lee. You've also spoken about having multiple vendors. Does that make life a lot harder? And I'm not just doing this for the fact that we do autonomous integration platforms, that's not my side, but does it get confusing having all these different products and do they integrate and how does that work for both of you?
Yes and no. In some ways, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because as soon as something goes wrong, you can bet that everything else is going to go wrong with that vendor. For me, it's about really looking at the partnership, what value that vendor adds. Like Lee was saying, if you've got a partner that, even though you're not spending any money with them, they're telling you about cyber risks, they're telling you about things that are pivotal within your industry that are going to help you, that's a relationship that I'm going to build. That's a relationship that I'm going to go, hey, guess what? They actually care, not just from a making money point of view, but from a longevity point of view. They're actually willing to go that extra mile because there's plenty of salespeople out there that know how to drop an email into someone's inbox. They can schedule them in Salesforce and annoy me continually. So it is really about choosing vendors that work with you. I think that's the key thing. So knowing that Sentinel are on our side, that we have access to them, that really matters to us because we're not big teams. Either one of us, we don't have big teams. So I need to be able to rely on my vendors to ask questions, stupid or not, and to know that their guidance is going to be valuable and it's going to be the right guidance for us. And knowing that your vendors aren't always there to just sell you things. I think is another thing. So trusting that, say if you go with a reseller like Technologica, you've got the ability, or they're going to use their discernment as well. They're not just going to go, these are the most expensive vendors because I'm getting a really good cut out of this. So buy. They're going to go, guess what? You don't actually need anything right now from us, but we're still going to stay in touch. We're going to have events like this, so you've still got that relationship that's built there as well.
Lee, same question.
Very. We're actually going through that now. My boss is a big fan of integrating everything into one solution. So either go 100% Microsoft, which again, that's back to me hiding under the table. That's them marking their own homework. They're spending a fortune in the security space, but I don't like the idea of them checking their own systems.
On why that is that. A lot of research on that, I can send that to you.
What I like to look for in a vendor is one that's going to listen. So you buy their system and then you say, look, that's great, but wouldn't it be great if it also did this? And they'll take it on board. I mean, when we bought Mimecast many years ago, that was the state they were in. You could say, hey guys, great, you do all this stuff, but how about doing X, Y, and Z? And then generally 6 months later, the dev team drops you in a test environment and away you go, you discover they've done it. Sentinel are the same. We've been prompting them. It's like, look guys, this is great, but I'm really annoying because I looked at this really expensive vendor just before we signed with you and I know the stuff they do. Any chance you might be going in that direction? I can't afford them, but I can afford you. Could you maybe just sneakily add these capabilities on? The ones I don't like are the ones that, here's our solution, this is the path you must follow to make our solution work, go that way. Not flexible, they're controlling you rather than you being allowed to go how you want to run your systems and how you run your security. So it's that flexibility for me that's key.
everything on
So left you just enough to say thank you, enjoy your meal.